even if you're scared, do it anyway, because ultimately that's what you're going to look back in and be one of the most proudest moments of your life. I always felt in the back of my mind, I was using probably about 10-15% of my capabilities, right? When you're working, for yourself and you have no choice but to put all yourself into it and be successful. Yes, the entrepreneur was always in my bug, but to actually make that leap toward entrepreneurship was definitely, I can remember that day vividly. I just knew it was happening and I finally did it. It was a weird day. It was like, mixed stuff. I did it, but like, what did I do? And so I commend everyone to do something like that scares you one time in your life at least. I guarantee that'll be one of the moments near the end of life and be like, you know what? I'm glad I did. So always think about those things that's in your heart, truly in your heart. Do it. Hey everyone, welcome once again to Medical Practice Success Secrets. I'm your host, Theo Harvey, owner of Synsormed, and I'm so excited today because I have Tatiana Brim, who's a student in the health informatics program at Georgia State University. This is a special episode because for the first time, I will be interviewed. And this is because Tatiana reached out to me and wanted to know I'm beginning my journey toward becoming digital health or health tech entrepreneur, but more in general, just a career. What does that look like for me? And what is some advice I would give to maybe a younger version of myself, if you will? So Tatiana, man, thank you for joining. I'm super excited to hear your questions and what you have for me on our podcast today. So I'll let you take it away. Did you want to preface anything before we get started?
No, just thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interview you, Theo. I really do appreciate it. So I'm really excited to hear the advice that you have to give. So I'll just jump into question one.
Absolutely.
So how did you decide to land in your current position?
You know what? I was in regular technology for about 20 years. Literally the day when I left, I got my 20-year plaque and I used to work at Cisco Systems. Have you heard of Cisco Systems before?
I've heard of Cisco, but not Cisco Systems.
Yeah, it's a large technology company. So back before the internet was a big
Mm-hmm.
thing, there's companies that had to build out the infrastructure. And so we sell things like routers, switches, things like that to make the internet a real thing. And so I would go around supporting customers in those efforts. And so I was on the early stages of technology. I went to Florida A&M. You can see behind me, FAMU, for engineering program. I went to Georgia Tech to get my master's in electrical engineering. So I always knew I wanted to be in technology. So when I was in school, I started to kind of progress and do things what I wanted to do. And then finally I got into grad school and I started to kind of think a little bit different around like, where I want my career to go. And
Right.
then I had my first child. I had my daughter, Layla, who is now 13. Spoiler alert if you don't know, but she's doing well. She, unfortunately, when she was first born, she had a defect where she had difficulty breathing, respiratory issues. And so she had to be placed into NICU. They say it's eye opening when you have a child for the first time. And it's so true because my eyes got opened. Hey, there's a bigger world than just technology for technology's sake. Can technology be more effective in other ways? And reason why that was important to me because when she was in NICU and she got released, thank God, but we had to constantly go back to the doctor. And it was tough because at the time, we stayed in Smyrna, Georgia, and she was all the way in Stone Mountain, where if you don't know, that's opposite ends of Georgia in Atlanta. So we had to drive all the way like at least once or twice a month. And then when we got there, so about 45-hour drive, we got there, had to find parking, pay for parking. And then we had to wait another 20-30 minutes to see the doctor and just to do 10-minute, 15-minute checkup and say, oh, she's fine. Here's some new medications. See you later. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way. And so that's when I started to get into, at the time, before Zoom was Zoom, the people who created Zoom used to work at Cisco, and they had a solution called WebEx, which is what I was really selling to customers. I said, why can't we do WebEx or Zoom where you can speak to the doctor? And that's when I went down the path of telehealth, which allows doctors and patients to communicate. And so that's kind of my journey. And because of the pain I was suffering,
Yeah.
can doctors connect to their patients remotely a lot easier and more effective? So when I started this journey 10 years ago, I mean, really only rural areas were really using telehealth in mass because
Mhm.
obviously if you're living in like Alaska, for instance, some places in Alaska, you have to fly to go see the doctor, right? Or if you're in rural Georgia, it takes a while to go see a doctor. So they had telehealth options. They didn't really have telehealth options in urban centers like, cities, like big cities like Tampa and other areas. It wasn't until COVID where, the rules kind of opened up, and then now everyone knew what telehealth was, because that was pretty much the only way you could see a doctor, right? And so that kind of, make a long story short, I started to be interested in technology and its effect in healthcare. And another uh, fortuitous opportunity was that my co-founder, his name is Amin Holmes, he was already in health tech for several years before. He was doing consulting. And so we kind of connected together. He was more on the technical side, I was on the business development side. And we formed our company, Synsormed, which is still thriving about 10 years later now, even as we speak. So basically it's a matter of internal intrinsic motivation, seeing that technology can be used in other areas, and then having the means when you have connections and people that are kind of in that space that can kind of guide you. And so I learned a lot, had to kind of go from zero. And part of that learning process was actually having the opportunity to teach at Georgia State and learning from the students as I taught about technology in healthcare. And so those are some of the journeys I took to kind of get to where I'm at today, if that helps.
That is so remarkable. I love how you took what you were going through and you were passionate about it and you were able to create such a thriving business. I love that. That's really good. That's memorable. So question two. Well, you already answered it in a way, but how long have you worked in the field that you're in? You said about 20 years. um, and I'll just skip to question three. Ooh, okay. So, what has been your greatest accomplishment? And I know you said, you created your business, but is there any other, would you say that's your greatest accomplishment?
Greatest accomplishment. Wow. I always feel like I've never achieved the height. There's always more to achieve and do things, in my opinion. But at this point, obviously, raising my kids, that's really important to me. Obviously, building this business, we were able to raise funding for our business, in a difficult time. I think you saw the statistics. Even, I mean, now it's probably even worse, but pre-pandemic and COVID, it was very hard for African American Black folks to get
Mm-hmm.
funding from investors, venture capital, and so we were able to kind of get that. Literally, we got our check in January 2020 for funding for our business, and then the world shut down in March of 2020. So we got the check at the right time. Now, obviously, there was things that were happening where there was opportunities to get more funding and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
we just, having the opportunity to raise funds, to build a business, and then kind of see it thriving has definitely been a great accomplishment. But really, the emotional ones are the ones that last the longest, which is the input I provide to my kids, but also to students and people I taught, and really sharing a piece of my philosophies to others is really important to me. So if you say what my greatest accomplishment is basically learning as much as I can, and then trying to impart that knowledge to the next generation as easy and as simple as I can. So those are some of my accomplishments that I really am proud of as I kind of move forward for the future.
Okay, I see. I see. I like that. I like that. Okay. So, question four. Think back to 5 years ago. Did you envision your career as it is today?
Well, we kind of talked about it, hinted at it. No, not really. I thought I was going to stay at Cisco, kind of go up the corporate ladder. I was in sales, doing fairly well. I actually went to graduate school at Emory just to kind of see what was out there and see what opportunities were. Obviously, there was huge opportunities to work with other companies and do different things, but it kept coming back to entrepreneurship. And I think it all came back to when I was an intern years ago in Tampa. I'm based in Tampa now, but originally I was in Georgia. So when I was in Tampa, I was walking the streets and my internship at Tampa Electric, and something just hit me and said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And that word just came to me because, I have a legacy of that. My grandfather was, kind of an entrepreneur. He's a contractor out of Illinois, near Chicago. And so kind of would go out with him and see him do different things. And there's something about that just spoke to me. It's just like the freedom to be your own boss, freedom to, make your own decisions, and also having money to do what you want to do. And so that was always in the back of my mind. So even when I started to work for companies, I thought that, hey, could I, I was only going to be here 5 years, or I'm going to be here 6 years. 20 years later, finally the idea, my motivation, everything kind of gelled, and I just went for it. And literally, I think that's kind of where I was, saying, hey, I think I was kind of building this while I was working at the same time. And then, when the money came in and then the opportunity and we started seeing sales, I made the leap. And, that's tough. Folks who are in corporate America or who work for large corporations, it's tough. You've been used to those consistent checks. You're used to consistent working with, and which is great. And nothing against corporate America or working in careers. I always tell everyone, definitely, if you don't feel like that, if entrepreneurs are your goal, but you're not ready yet, definitely do what I did and start with a company that's great. Like I would have my only challenge different. I would probably start with a smaller company because you do a lot more. When you work for bigger companies, they have so many resources. Sometimes it's difficult to kind of stand down. You kind of coast for several years and hide out. But when you're a smaller company, you get so many responsibilities. Like I had several interns who came and some we hired on our company, and they moved on to bigger companies that always kind of come back and ask, wow, I really did a lot more that I'm doing now. And I just didn't understand like what you guys are teaching me. I said, yeah, I mean, my co-founder, I mean, and I both came from big companies. So we know, obviously we were great at what we did at our big companies, but I always felt in the back of my mind, I was using probably about 10, 15% of my capabilities. Right. And so when you're working, for yourself, and you have no choice but to put all yourself into it and be successful. So when I think about that, yes, the entrepreneur was always in my bug, but to actually make that leap toward entrepreneurship was definitely, I can remember that day vividly. I just knew it was happening and I finally did it. It was a weird day. It was like, mixed stuff. I did it, but like, what did I do? And so that is that I commend everyone to do something like that that scares you one time in your life at least. And
Be
you and
brave.
that's what,
Yeah.
and I guarantee that'll be one of the moments that I'll think on, near the end of life and be like, you know what, I'm glad I did. So always think about those things that's in your heart, truly in your heart. Do it. Even if you're scared, do it anyway, because ultimately that's what you're going to look back in it and be one of the most proudest moments of your life.
And that's true. And that's true. And I love like that you were brave and you were exposed to that entrepreneurship because you don't see much black representation like that, like to see a
Hmm.
CEO of a company, you don't see that much. And I'm really, I know it might not mean much, but I'm proud of you. Good job. Like I believe it. It was not easy. Um, but here we'll go to question 5. So, ooh, okay. Was there a role that you applied for and landed, but you weren't 100% qualified to do? And how do you proceed with that?
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking through that. Was there anything, I got hired for that I felt like I wasn't qualified, to do and all that? You know what? I had worked for that company literally after grad school. The only company I really worked for full time was Cisco. I worked for them so long. I did odd jobs here and there. Be honest with you, when I started doing the working with companies to help them kind of migrate the whole system and all that. It was a lot to do with that. I had to kind of, well, for instance, if I was teaching at Georgia State, right, I had to learn a lot too, right? Yes, I knew the technology, I knew about healthcare, but just how do you communicate that more effectively? I think you don't really understand something unless you can teach it and teach it where someone can understand it. And
Yeah.
so when I kind of did that for a couple of years, I understood how to communicate healthcare, things like HIPAA, understanding PHI, understanding,
Mm-hmm.
how to do cryptography, right? Understanding, secret keys and all that to understand everything's protected when you send patient data. Understanding EHRs, EMRs, things that I talk to
Yeah, having to know all
medical
that.
practices with every day, right? SQL, is you familiar, right? And how to kind of set that up, protecting the data. So that's protected and secure because we don't want to make sure patient information is definitely secure for the long time. So those are some of the things that I try to look for. I had to learn through all that and understand that process. I can communicate more effectively to the students. And so that was one I felt like, okay, this is a journey and I enjoyed it and definitely would love to do it again soon. So
Okay, awesome. And I think we have time for one more question. Um, I have to choose which one. I want to know so much. Okay. What is the most challenging part of your current position, which is being an entrepreneur, being, a CEO of a company of Synsormed? What is the most challenging part of that?
I don't think it's challenging. It's just interesting, just not know what the day brings. You can plan and all you want. I try to plan a lot. My team can tell you I send them these long emails on Mondays, with things of different tasks and stuff like that. That's just top of mind. I used to be one of those guys that would call you as soon as it's on my mind, but I started to just kind of consolidate them into one email so that way I can get it off my chest. I'm one of those completist persons. Like I like puzzles. I like everything kind of in order. And so if there's a missing piece, I'm always like, got to figure that out. So just not knowing what to prepare for can be a challenge sometimes, right? And then the constant. So you're playing several different games, right? You're definitely playing the internal game. Like, how do you feel inside yourself? Are you excited? Are you motivated to do things? Then you're playing the
Mm-hmm.
motivation with your team. How to motivate them? Are they excited? Do they like what they do? Do they need a different role? Do we need new people in the role?
Wearing a whole bunch of different hats. Yeah.
Yep. Then you're playing the game with the market, right? The market is changing, right? If you don't know what's happening right now, obviously COVID changed things. That love went up, then it went back down because people went back to traditional way of communicating. So how do you still sell a solution that's really driven by remote care? And now we're dealing with, as we're recording this, they are starting to make cuts at human health services, and Medicaid, Medicaid services. And so what does that mean for new programs that we take advantage of to help patients, right? Are some of these the funding for these programs going to get cut, and how do you navigate against that? So as you can see, I'm playing three different levels of games, right, with inside myself to kind of maneuver how we're going to continue with the business and keep it growing, right? Understanding that, and that's always can be challenging, right? Because sometimes you feel it, or sometimes your team is just not moving where you want it to be, or sometimes the market's not in your favor. But you still have to kind of maneuver all that and find the right combination, like a Rubik's cube, to figure out what would be successful for your business at that time. And it can change.
It can always change, yeah. And I'm glad that you're finding ways to navigate that. Because yeah, wearing all those different hats, I could only imagine. You're a champ. Okay, and the next question is that kind of I feel like this kind of it leaps into this one pretty well. So which leadership skills were the most difficult to develop?
So, when you say leadership skills, I mean, I think it's a bunch of other things impacting that because, no one's just like a leader per se. I mean, it's just different ways of leadership. Part of it is just listening skills. I think that's just ongoing uh, skill that you're trying to continue. I think one of the things I've learned, just like when I say listening, so basically to be a good leader, I always say you have to be a good follower, right? And so if you know how to listen well, understand what people are asking, and then also the hardest part sometimes in this world, because we live in a social media age where there's so much judgment and things like that. How do you listen with empathy and not with some bias, right? So if you speak to me, you say something to me, I shouldn't be thinking in the back of my head, oh, you're trying out to get me, or what you're saying is wrong because you're younger than me. You got to stay humble, right? So listening with empathy and with humbleness can help you become a better leader, because now I can truly understand what you're getting at, right? There's no hidden agenda. I'm just going clearly by your words and your actions, and then we can talk on a level where no one can be offended and stuff like that. Because true leadership is about really getting heard and then kind of coming to consensus of a direction. So I have a vision. So as a leader, I may have the vision, but then I need to understand, do you fit that vision, right? From a resource standpoint, from a cultural fit. And so with SensorMed, we have cultural values, right? We have 5 values that we align. Anybody that joins the organization, interns, they listen to our video. We talk about our values and understanding things like having a growth mindset, right? Being bigger
Yes.
than what you are, being very collaborative. We're a remote team, so if someone's asking for help, jump in there and help them out. And so we try to make sure we have people that fit in
Hmm.
that process, and that starts with listening, making sure you have a vision, and then finally, building a culture so that people, because it's really about at a certain point, you do a lot of stuff, but really the power comes in leverage, which is utilizing people to the maximum of their abilities. And
Right.
so, if you understand that you have the right people in the right seats, then you can do a lot. And that's the goal, right? To kind of get the right people in the right seats so that you can move mountains and build a business to something that's successful. So those are some of the things that I think can kind of build, leadership skills, especially as a person that's just starting off in a career, right? Look at better ways of listening first, take away your biases, right? having a clear understanding of what your cultural values are, having a vision of where you see yourself going or where you see this organization going, right? And being able to articulate that clearly, and then finding the right people who can fit that based on, their capabilities and resources. And so if you can develop all those, then definitely the leadership skills, are there for the taking. And we definitely sorely need great leadership wherever you are.
I like that. That was a really good answer because I know listening could be is such an overlooked skill, and everyone's like, "Oh, I listen all the time," but are you actually using active listening, and are you listening to not just give a response, but actually try to understand where people are coming from, remove, like I said, remove that bias, and just be able to actually have an effective team when you can hear what everyone's saying and come to like a conclusion or like a middle ground where everyone could work together. So I really do like that response. That was I'm glad I'm interviewing you. You know what I'm saying? I'm learning a lot right now. but
Awesome. Awesome.
all right, so we're almost done. We have like two more questions. So, oh, I can't. Okay, so I know you said you worked at Cisco Systems. So, can you tell me a time when you had a difficult boss and how did you handle that situation? Whether it's like a difficult manager, super anyone, like anyone above you that was giving you a hard time.
Yeah, great question. I mean, a lot of people getting started in their careers, may not gel with their immediate boss, right? You may be a great fit for the organization, but maybe your immediate boss just not fitting well. You guys are not fitting well. Your personalities may be different. So yeah, I had a boss like that. The challenge I had with the boss was that I would go to him and ask him, hey, am I doing well? How can I improve? And everything was fine. It's fine until I got a review, which is terrible. And I was like, what happened? How come you didn't communicate that to me, right? So I can improve or get better, or at least be upfront with me, right? To kind of talk to me about, look, there's some things you need to improve, be honest with you. And so, here's some things we can talk about. And so that's the thing. I try to impart with, my team. If they ask me direct questions, I may not be able to say like, hey, this is what's going to happen, yes or no. But I can say the trend is saying that you're not doing well here. So look at the numbers or look at what you've done. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is what it looks like. Now you have ways to improve, and I told you ways to improve. Let's see. And so I try to be as upfront as possible so that people are not shocked. I mean, with how their performance is. And, one of the things I think kind of mitigates against that is just having clear metrics of what the goals are and what you're trying to achieve. So if you have an assignment or so that goes back to that communication and leadership again. If you are assigning someone, making sure they're clear on what the task is, making sure they understand what the deadline is, and then give them maybe context. I always like to give people context on why they're doing this. So, I can say, hey, I need you to go through this Excel sheet and filter, 1,000 different doctors out so we can kind of, do this one thing. And they'd be like, oh man, that's going to take forever. I got to create a pivot table and do all this other stuff. But then I said, well, the reason why is because those are the doctors that are most key who will be aligned to our solution and we can potentially sell to them. So hopefully that gives you impetus that yes, this is a small piece of the bigger picture, but I'm fitting well into where this goes. And that gives you hope that if I do this a great job here, I can move up that chain a little bit faster because now I understand why I did that. So for instance, I say, okay, now you got this list. Can you reach out to the doctors, right? And do a questionnaire with them. And so that's the next step in the chain, right? And then if you reach out to doctors, can you follow up with them and then, provide them with a service? So there's things that you can do even at the small level when people are assigning, tasks to you to kind of get through that. So I say that all to say is that at the end of the day, having a manager who may not gel with you personality wise is, I think that's, something you can overcome. But when they are not clear and concise, then it's on you to kind of speak up and say, hey, can you tell me their deadline? What's the goals here? Can you give me the context? And then that would, I'm sure that would help, that process along faster when you have a manager or a boss that can kind of guide you. And any manager worth their salt will tell you that. So you have more, because at the end of the day, we're human beings. And so we need meaning in what we're doing. We don't just, we're not AI bots yet, right? Or, trying to take over. But we need meaning in our work and what we're doing, and so another human being can provide that, but they have to care enough, right, and have
Right.
empathy
Yeah, they
for them
that
to
is true.
understand that, and I think that goes a long way.
Nah, yeah, and I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I really like the advice that you gave in that sense, because yeah, if you're not understanding something, then it is good to reach out to that boss that you're thinking is difficult, so you can understand your scope. What are you focusing, what do what's your task, what do you have to do, so then that awkward situation or anything like that that could happen, it's just, it can be avoided. So that was some good advice. So, and last but not least, my last question for the day: how did you develop the skill of speaking in front of people? Public speaking. So, what in your career helped you develop that skill?
Absolutely. It is ongoing skill that's still evolving. I definitely think I'm better one on one, but I definitely want to do more how you can communicate more with people. But just like anything, you do more of it, right? Try to find opportunities to speak to more folks in front. I've been on panels before. I spoke by myself. I had to go to pitch competitions and, sell my business. I had to sell a solution to groups. I had to speak to executives. So you just do it more and more, and then you learn a little bit more and more. One thing, I try to do more. Obviously, I do a lot with social media. Try to do more camera work and kind of look at, okay, I could set that better. Watch the put more context around what I'm saying, right? And then the goal there is to kind of get better. Top sports guys, right? What do they do? Watch tape, right? That's how you improve, right? Looking at ways you can get better. Find coaches, people who do this and understand how you can better. Doesn't have to be someone you pay. It can be YouTube coaches at this point, but anybody that can kind of give you a little nugget to get 1% better. That's what I try to do. So I say do more of it, learn from others via watching YouTube videos and stuff, and then kind of record yourself and practice and seeing how you can get better. And you'll be surprised how much better you can get as a public speaker over time.
I like that. And I feel like that's some really good advice for like more introverted people, because I used to be a bit introverted. And yeah, my professional development professor actually told me, like, try recording yourself and like look at your cues, how you're speaking and things like that. And it did help. I can talk a little better now. So
Well, and I always, and we were going to talk about this before. As you can see, I have a YouTube channel and do some stuff with social media. That obviously helps, right? Because now you're talking to a camera, but yes, you're trying to convey for an audience, and usually you're going to filter yourself better. You're going to be more clear, and you're looking to convey a message a little bit succinctly, as opposed to just in your own head. And so, the more you practice that, and I highly recommend even young folks, just start a YouTube channel, talk about your journey to getting a job in digital health, right? Or talking about your journey as a programmer or developer. I obviously highly recommend any young person, because that's the world. That's where we live in now, right? People want to see you build in public. They want to see you grow in public. And then you never know. You might have a following, and then those folks want to listen to what you have to say. And that could be a business or it could be a community. It doesn't matter, but it'd be people that are looking up. And by de facto, you're a leader because now you have a small community that's following you. So having a YouTube channel presence, and like I said, yes, everyone has a presence now, IG and doing little TikTok dances and all that. But my opinion is like having a purpose with a YouTube channel that's showing you building a body of work. And I guarantee, people talking about there's shortage and all that of hiring. I guarantee you'll be top of line in any job search because you have that.
because yeah, and like I said, I when I saw that you had this YouTube channel, I was like, wow, not only can I get my assignment done, but I know this video will help a lot of even my classmates, because they have so many questions, and having just a video that they could always, backtrack on and listen to what someone, as refined as yourself, like giving them that advice, it really goes a long way. Even if you could just pop it into your ear while you're at work or something or studying, listening to someone reiterate that advice, it does help a lot, because it can get overwhelming. So it's
If you listen to some of my podcasts, I talk to doctors all across the country, and a lot of them were scared to even put their knowledge, think about all the insights they have on social media. But those that do, they realize like that there's benefits from that, right? Because one doctor, Dr. Isam, he talked about he kept getting the same questions over and over again from his patients. And so by putting kind of like frequently asked questions, FAQ, together on his YouTube channel, that allow him to help his patients, but also help other patients who had similar questions. And that's what motivated him to do that. Or Dr. Jane Morgan, she did during COVID, she did this stairway series where she would just be on the stairs talking about COVID and how you can prevent yourself from this. Or Dr. Refi, who talked about better ways to breathe if you're suffering from, a respiratory issue. So I think, even folks who have high knowledge have to put themselves out there. But I think, that goes where empathy comes in, right? And intentionality. Don't think about yourself as, hey, people are going to criticize me, they're going to look at my hair funny or how I talk. But think about what the purpose is. Your purpose is to help people, and that's going to shine through. And you'll be surprised. Like some of the doctors I talk to have hundreds of thousands of followers, right? Because they're intentional about what they do. And so I think anyone can do that. They just put themselves out there. So encourage the young ones out there. And I agree. Yeah. So definitely please share this video with your classmates, and definitely hopefully this can help them as they progress in their career journey.
All right. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions. You were amazing. The advice was great. And of course, I'm going to share the this video with them, and I hope everyone else, tune into more of your videos because you have some good advice. You get some good insight, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Well, everyone, thank you for listening, Tatiana. Thank you for taking over this interview channel and this podcast and asking your questions. So please, this is what's happening in healthcare right now. And we're all trying to adjust to this new normal. So go check out our other videos if you want to learn more about that. Thank you, Tatiana.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Look, we have more content that can really help you accelerate your practice this year. We have tons of content that can cover all the different topics we discussed earlier. If you want to hear more, click to the right or to the left and you'll get more content to understand how to best grow your practice.